Hi the people, how you doing? So, well, it is finally that time again. A Vivo flagship review. I must say, far as I have seen, Vivo flagships have been one of the most fun smartphones to review. For almost every single one of them since the X50 Pro, back when I started. Well, this is very similar. It is an incremental update, but there's just so much to talk about. It's just a fun time for me, and hopefully for you as well. So, we're gonna jump right in because there is quite a lot of things to cover. Obviously, we're gonna start up with the design, and, well, in this case, there are, I would say, three major components to the design itself. The first one is very simple. It's the form factor. I think, at this point, this form factor with curved edges and, less bezels and punch hole design, it's basically become the blueprint of flagships, and it's good. In my opinion, I like curved edges. I think they're very easy to hold. I absolutely do not mind a curved display. I know some people do, but this is just what you're getting. Maybe it's unfortunate for you, but I don't really feel they're that bad. And there's not really much to say here because we are all used to this. Where real differences come out, however, is when we talk about the finish. And boy oh boy, let me tell you. I mean, I don't think I have to tell you, but this is the best finish on any smartphone that I've ever used. It's quite simply incredible. There are no fingerprints. No matter how much I use this phone, not once have I seen a single fingerprint on the matte finish portion of this. There are fingerprints on the camera module, of course, but yeah, the finish itself it's so good, so practical, and yet looks and feels so incredible. It's got this almost soft touch to it. It's hard to describe. But I can tell you this much, if you use this phone without a case, you're gonna have one hell of a time with this finish. At least if you're anything like me. But anyways, let's talk about the camera module. I think this is where also a lot of people are either going to not mind it or they're really going to dislike it, because I think this time around Vivo didn't exactly strike a home run. I think the biggest issue that I have is that not all the cameras are inside a very obviously designated camera ring. The periscope zoom camera is placed to a corner, and I think it's weird because it looks like they forgot to put the periscope camera and then they just had to shove it in there. I don't know, it's just an odd design and a weird design choice. That's just my opinion. I'm not sure how you feel. If you do feel that you completely disagree with me, let me know in the comments. But yeah, otherwise, design, I think if I were to call out a flaw, it would be the camera module, quite obviously, but otherwise it's about as good as it can get. The bezels, however, on the front, they are slightly thicker than other flagships, especially the S22 Ultra. That is something to keep in mind. It didn't really bother me when I used it, but it's just an observation. When I just held them side by side, definitely a difference there. So that's the design, but now let's talk about the display. And the display itself, it's fine. There's nothing especially new or incredible in there, but it's the in-display fingerprint scanner that's, I would go so far as to say, revolutionary. It really is something else right here, because we have this incredibly huge area on this phone, on the lower half, and it's unprecedented, unlike anything that we have in any other, let's say, widely available flagship. If you take into account all the advantages you're getting here, you have incredible accuracy. It almost never missed. In the entire about 3, maybe 4 weeks that I've used this phone, you just have this huge surface area, and that means that you're never gonna miss out on placing the finger correctly. And then there's the speed. The fastest fingerprint scanner that I've used thus far. Nothing even comes close. And well, I kind of remember this like it was yesterday, because the very first time I just booted up this phone, set it up, did everything, locked the screen, tried out the fingerprint scanner, and I was like, Jesus tap dancing Christ, that is fast. But with that said, enough of me raving about the fingerprint scanner, which is clearly the best that I've ever used. But the rest of the display, it's about as flagshipy as it can get, We have an amazing brightness, about 1500 nits, not the highest, of course. It's 1700 is thus far the highest, at least among the phones that I've used. This 1500, you probably won't see the difference unless you were holding, let's say, this one and the S22 Ultra side by side in the blazing sun. You won't really have any issues is what I'm really trying to say here. HDR looks surprisingly amazing. Like, I had expected it to look kind of flat and muted. Generally, that's how some phones turn out to be, but not this one. This one has amazing HDR content, regular content, I mean. Needless to say, it looks really, really good on the X80 Pro. So yeah, all in all, you're gonna have an amazing experience with the display. I didn't even notice a single stutter while I was using it. And speakers too, surprisingly, speakers are very nice and loud, and maybe they're not quite as full as the S22 Ultra, but I mean, this is about as good as it can get. And I can testify right now that I think these speakers are not going to disappoint in the slightest. So with that done, now I understand that the cameras are obviously the most interesting area to talk about, so obviously we're going to save that for the last. Before that, I'm just going to touch briefly on the performance. It's good. It's a flagship and it works well. In terms of heating, I would say that it's not really bad. I didn't really experience any issues. Obviously, it heated up a little when I was shooting video outdoors, and well, that kind of happens with every single flagship, so I don't really see that as a red flag. And for regular usage, of course, there were no issues whatsoever, so performance is not going to be an issue for you guys. And as for gaming, of course, I don't really game on my smartphone, so I can't really attest for how good it is. I can't really get into the technical details, but I sincerely doubt it's going to be an issue. I do push the phone far with photo editing and all that jazz, but gaming is not something I do. And finally, for battery, it's a very similar story. There's really nothing to talk about because it's good, solid battery life. It's actually slightly better than I expected, because in the unboxing video, I kind of remember saying that 4700 mAh maybe won't perform as well, but it did. It definitely surpassed my expectations, proved me wrong. I'm glad it did, because good battery life is something that I definitely look forward to, because if you cannot get 6 to 6.5 hours of screen on time, then you're not really looking at flagship level battery life now, are you? But now, with all of that done, it is time to talk about the cameras, and we're gonna dive deep. So, we have what I would consider a very similar setup compared to what we had last year with the X70 Pro Plus. Essentially, it's a 48 megapixel main camera, 50 megapixel ultra wide, I believe it's a 12 megapixel 2x telephoto zoom, and finally a 5x periscope, which is not good. Just the 5x periscope, not the rest of them. It's hard to put into words how I feel about this camera. It's good. It is extremely good, to be honest, with photography especially. I mean, you can check out all of the camera comparisons I've done. They are quite interesting, to say the very least. I've compared it to the Xiaomi 12 Pro and the S22 Ultra. I think they were some of the most interesting camera comparisons I've done this year. But anyways, if I were to just summarize, I would say that for daylight photos, I really like the new approach that Vivo has taken with the Zeiss natural colors. I know not everybody likes it, you know, a lot of people really like vibrant photos, very similar to the ones we can get from the S22 Ultra, and I mean, I respect that. Sure, you like vibrant colors, by all means, that's your opinion. I'm not here to debate that. I'm just saying that if you like natural colors, and if you're anything like me and you want photos to look realistic, look similar to how they should when you take the shot, well, then the X80 Pro, there's really nothing else like it, to be honest. At least not among the majority of the flagship that you can buy immediately. The natural colors with Zeiss natural colors enabled, it really is something else. And honestly, if you were to ask me, I would pick this for photography over the S22 Ultra. That's just my opinion right here. Not just because there's a huge price gap, but just simply because I like how it looks. It's very much a personal preference, as it is that it's just an amazing camera in general. But one of the areas where I didn't quite expect improvements, but I'm really glad that we have them, it is with selfies. It has improved so much. Like, I expected selfies to not be very good, given how I was kind of disappointed with the X70 Pro Plus last year, but Vivo really upped their game with the software processing. I mean, I make it sound small, but it's no small feat. Making the software good enough for selfies is really nice to see, and it just makes it a truly amazing photography camera, because selfies are great, portraits are amazing. Now, in terms of portraits, if you want perfect portraits in most situations, there is one thing you need to do. you have to use planar portraits for incredible contrast when the lighting is good and your subject is not backlit. But when it is backlit, and I really talked about this in the S22 Ultra versus the X80 Pro camera comparison as well, but if it is backlit, then do not use planar portraits. Now if you're using the normal portrait mode without any of the Zeiss portrait features, then this whole thing is moot. But if you are, then just keep this in mind. Planar portraits really enhances the brightness and contrast on the subject's face, and if your subject is backlit, then you're gonna get a weird halo around it, and no one really likes that. So for that reason, that is one caveat in a way, because it's, let's just say it's an inconvenience if you really want perfect portraits from the X80 Pro. But given how stylish portraits can be and just how good contrast and skin tones are in general on the X80 Pro, I mean, I almost feel like it's worth it. I really want to know from you guys, do you think it's worth it? Subjectively, I think these are my favorite cameras thus far, but objectively, I still think these are really good. Don't get me wrong, there are definitely things to keep in mind, like the planar portrait situation. There are also things that Vivo really needs to improve. That 5x periscope zoom is, I mean, it's an 8 megapixel, really low quality sensor. It's really not good. You're not gonna get anything particularly great out of zoom, and just the general versatility, it's not really up there with many other flagships that we have seen thus far. Now finally, for night mode, well, I would say that you get quite incredible night mode from the X80 Pro. But I would also go so far as to say that it is not natural, not quite as much as the daylight photos. Because I distinctly remember when I compared this one to the S22 Ultra, the S22's contrast and the way it preserved the brightness and shadows in the scene is very natural, and it looks really nice in my opinion. Because I somehow have just developed this huge liking towards natural photos. I really like the S22 Ultra because of that. I mean, look, the X80 Pro, with the processing that it has, it can do some miraculous stuff. Like, it can give you immense amount of detail, especially in the shadows. Its brightness is amazing, HDR is spot on almost every single time, and especially the noise reduction, very impressive on the X80 Pro right here. But that said, if you're looking for natural looking night mode images, then first and foremost, go into your settings and turn off enhanced night sky. I do understand that a lot of people do not like blue night skies, so for that reason, definitely turn that off. You're gonna have a much more natural looking night sky. It is still going to be very bright in terms of night sky. I wish it was darker and it represented the night scene more, but that's just how it is. Now finally, we have videos, and before we get into quality, which is, it's not really that great, but we'll talk about that in a moment. One thing that I definitely want to touch on is the gimbal stabilization system. It's a hardware feature that is only available on the Vivo flagships that we have had thus far, all the way from the X50 Pro. And the X80 Pro, it doesn't have the gimbal stabilization in the right camera sensor. We do have it in the 2x telephoto. I'm just speechless, and I don't really know how to explain it, because it really does not make any sense whatsoever as to why we have it on the 2x telephoto. It is not useful with night mode, because at night Vivo just crops in on the main camera. You get amazing results with that, but that's a different story. In video, I mean, yeah, sure, maybe you're gonna get slightly more stable video when you use it, but I mean, still, it's not that amazing, to be entirely honest. And I really wish we would have it back on the main camera. That's where the gimbal stabilization system really belongs. But anyways, for video, in terms of 4K with either the main camera, the ultra wide, or even 8K, I think detail preservation has improved compared to last year. But that said, there are still quite a few areas for the X80 Pro to really improve on, to really give us amazing video. I mean, look, its video quality is alright. That's really the best way I can phrase it. But yeah, this camera on the X80 Pro, it is very much a photography camera first, and it also has pretty good, alright looking video as well. First and foremost, the colors are very inconsistent between the different camera lenses. So you use the ultra wide, you get pretty natural looking colors with high contrast, but then you go to the main camera and in my experience the colors are very vibrant with high contrast once again. And especially in terms of HDR, we have an HDR mode on the X80 Pro. And the problem is when you use it, if you're using it for close-up subjects or maybe kids in general, you're gonna have an issue with focusing, and that's a real bummer because the HDR mode works really well. It just doesn't work well with all of the features that you expect it to. Believe me, it is a great feature, but it's not been implemented properly. Now, speaking of implementation, we have probably the best night mode video on the X80 Pro thus far, because first and foremost it works with 4K, and as I've always said, unless it's like super steady or slow motion, you should always use 4K video because you get the best possible quality out of it. Secondly, and I think most importantly, it doesn't overexpose just for the sake of brightness. This night mode video right here, this is the best you can find, and yes, there is a loss in stabilization, but other than that, it's just an amazing mode that works extremely well. So with that said, man, I'm pretty sure this video is gonna be pretty long, so I'll keep the rest of it short. For the operating system, we have FunTouch OS, which, you know, other than the name, which is kind of weird and almost childish, the rest of the OS and just the UI in general, it is incredible. It has amazing customization, it works really well, very snappy, very fast. This is definitely an incremental update, but there are quite a few important upgrades that we have had thus far. First and foremost, this fingerprint scanner. It's a chef's kiss, you know. But yeah, other than that, in terms of photography, great selfies. That's a huge deal for me. Selfie video is not very good. It's 1080p. It's too high contrast sometimes, in my opinion. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. HDR is not good, you know, that sort of thing. But other than that, I do hope that Vivo keeps improving video, because let's just say, you know, they are taking steps in the right direction, especially with like the details, but these are kind of baby steps. So I do hope to see that these improvements keep going, and maybe bigger improvements come with the next generation, or maybe even the X80 Pro Plus. That is kind of close to the horizon. So yeah, definitely looking forward to that. I do hope you guys enjoyed this review. I think this might just be the phone that makes me switch over from the S22 Ultra when I'm not reviewing or actively reviewing a flagship. I don't know. We'll find out, I guess. I'm really hoping to do a complete comparison between this one and the S22 Ultra. I think it'd be quite worthwhile for most people, including myself, to be honest. So with that said, I do hope you guys enjoyed. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I will be seeing you guys later. Cheers!